let's do this.
Okay.
You know what? I like you.
I like you too.
I'm Wes.
I'm Hannah.
And this is the Green Screen. So today we got a different sort of topic. It's not so general, but it's actually based off of this video by a pastor named Dava Coverstons. And what he has here is what I'm calling his November calendar prophecy. And it's about a 15-minute video. It's on Facebook, and currently it has about 3 million views. The video was originally released on June 25th, 2020. Now that's an important number because this is, again, prophetic. So the fact that this was said in June 25th of 2020 is a really big deal. So what we're going to do here is we're going to briefly summarize the video. I'm going to post a link in the description, so if you guys want to check the video out for yourselves on Facebook, please give it a watch. I think it's a big deal that you listen to everything come from the horse's mouth, but today we're going to be highlighting, I think, a lot of the stuff that's really important in it. So
Yeah.
pay it close attention because we're going to try to go through this summary relatively quickly. So, what is the November calendar prophecy? Well, the November calendar prophecy is a warning for rural America and for America at large, and it is focused on being a pinnacle moment in the United States history and to show that God is predicting stuff for us so that we can prepare ourselves. But ultimately, I think this is going to serve as something that's going to be a benchmark moment in history where we're going to see a drastic change in the church. So not just, this isn't just a warning to prepare yourselves, in my opinion. This is also a foretelling of what the church is going to be in America in the near future. So let's start with what the actual prophecy says. So this prophecy, particularly the one of great importance, the November calendar prophecy, is split into two parts. So the first part of the prophecy starts, it's December 2019, early December 2019. He goes to bed and he gets this vision where he is seeing a calendar before him, and what it'll do is the calendar will flip. So it starts on January and it flips to March, and once March comes up, a disembodied hand of some sort comes, like a spiritual one, if you will. So think of it like a representation of the Holy Spirit is how he interprets it. And he takes the calendar and he underlines the word March and then taps it 3 times like this. Afterwards, it flips 3 more pages to June. So it skips April, May to June, underlines it 3 times, taps it 3 times. This is a mark of emphasis, obviously. And what happens next is the pastor who had this vision indicates the content of what comes after. So after the tapping, he starts seeing visions that go along these lines. People wearing masks, violent protests, buildings on fire, headlines of thousands of people getting sick. So we're talking about like mainstream news being like thousands and thousands of people are getting sick and being hospitalized. People on ventilators. People in fear, shutting themselves up in their homes. Emphasis on people being in fear. Some other interesting details that are within this part 1 prophecy are courthouses and state houses of being surrounded. So
Which had not happened yet, I don't think, at the time when he gave this original prophecy.
I think this one, yeah, well obviously because it's a prophecy, but because he gave this one in December. So it's June 25th when he posts this video, and he does a brief analysis of some of the things that have happened. But before that, the prophecy ends after this point, and he heard a voice repeatedly saying, "Brace yourselves, brace yourselves." Okay. So he then goes on to reflect the meaning of this prophecy and kind of the things that have come since. And, it's after June today, so we can actually reflect on some of the things with greater emphasis. But he talks about how the COVID-19 pandemic happened, so obviously, what things are we seeing there? People wearing masks. That really starts up mid-April-ish, I think, is when masks really become a big thing because, first people were
They kind
saying...
of had an uptick.
Yeah, people weren't saying, don't wear masks because we need them, and conservatives were saying, well, maybe we should start making masks, and then everybody flips, and now everybody's all about masks, so it really takes a wild turn in April. But we're seeing people sick by thousands, no surprise there, people shut up in their homes, yes. Violent protests, buildings on fire. This really comes... At this time, I don't think he had known about Black Lives Matter, but Black Lives Matter had really started doing the rioting, and they had been at it for nearly 120 continuous days of nightly riots every single day, with very few exceptions, from June all the way up till probably mid-September, maybe even early October. So check. All those things came true. Every single one of them. So what comes next? Well, part 2. So part 2 of this prophecy, like I said before, happened the Monday of the night that of the week he posted that video, which was June 22nd, 2020. That's when this particular dream was had. And today, when me and Hannah are talking about this, it is November 4th, the day after the main election. And we are in a point currently where
we don't know who won.
We just have no idea, but it's looking Biden to me, personally.
If everything goes the way they're currently projecting it, then that's probable, but it's still totally in toss-up territory.
Yeah, in terms of numbers, I think we're looking at a Biden victory, though, in terms of the numbers, but I don't know if that means we're seeing a President Biden. I think we're very likely going to the courts at some point because there have been a lot of rule changes, rule shifts that are quote-unquote necessary for the pandemic. We've seen Pennsylvania, which is one of the big swing states at the time, halting counting elections. It's not as big a state as Florida, and yet Florida managed to count all of its absentee ballots, get everything turned in a pretty reasonable manner, and Trump wins that state pretty handily, about 3%, something like that.
They stopped at 64% last night for Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and they stopped at 64%, and this, at the time I'm talking, I think we're probably somewhere around 65. So they're saying that this is going to go through Friday, which is insane. Also, ballots not postmarked can be counted. So ballots that are not postmarked November 3rd could be counted in election. In other words, we could have actual ballots counted that were cast after the day of the election. Democrats run the AG, they run the governorship in Pennsylvania, so ultimately these guys get to make these horrific litigating decisions that are arbitrary in nature, but they're chalking up to the COVID-19 thing. So, needless to say, it's tense here right now. And we are looking at unprecedented electoral weirdness. I think as of now, Georgia is currently up for grabs to some extent, even though we have nearly 95% reporting and Trump is in the lead. Same thing with North Carolina. It is bizarre. But let's get back to this prophecy, the part 2 prophecy. This part 2 prophecy, again, is connected to the first one because it's part 2. And let me explain kind of why that's important. So at the very beginning of this prophecy, he has a dream, and the dream, like the other one, has a calendar in it. This time it starts on June, though, so it doesn't start in January, and then a white figure appears and says, part 2. So clearly, he's had this dream already. It was of great significance to him. He had told a lot of people about it in his church, and he'd been praying about it. He'd been hearing this, prepare yourselves,
and he'd already
brace
seen
yourselves.
some of it come true.
Yeah, and he'd already seen some of it come true, so he already has kind of like this is firmly in his mind. So part 2, we flip, and it goes to, starts in June, flips to September. And at September, 3 underlines, 3 tabs. Let's talk briefly about September.
So, what I took as being the big event that might be indicated in September would be the National Day of Prayer, because you had millions and millions of Christians joining via largely podcast, not only in America, but actually worldwide.
Yeah.
It was
And
actually,
even...
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, no, you can...
It was a big event in Israel, too, they said. There were, I don't know how many thousand tuning in, and all across the world as well.
So I went to the live version of this event. It was in Washington, D.C., where the big deal of this event happened, and it was, obviously during this time the environment is still COVID-19 pandemic. We're in this highly, highly regulated liberal area related to COVID-19. And we're walking around in this area where there's just a bunch of people together in Washington, D.C. on the National Mall. You know, where we can see the Congress building behind the stage and everything. And it's everybody's really close together. I think if I was going to get COVID, it was at that point in time. There was a lady who was practically hacking up her lung behind me, not wearing a mask. It was kind of like, I was going, not that I'm not scared of COVID or anything, because I'd be fine, but I didn't get it, so take COVID for what you will from this. But from that. But what's interesting about that event is it was really hyped up by Jonathan Cahn and everybody else who is participating in the event or who had streamed it to their churches as kind of this pinnacle moment for Christians to come together and kind of make a last stand, to some extent, all together. And me personally, I love the sentiment. Like, we're talking about a religion that is, in effect, competing with Islam, and they gather those kind of people yearly on their pilgrimages to Mecca.
And in America,
in massive
I'd
droves
say
of numbers, so
we're more so competing with secularism.
Yeah, but I mean, like, when it comes to, like, what does a religion look like? This is something that I think, religion should look like this at some point. If we're talking about a religion that really considers itself a world contender, it needs to be able to gather its forces, I think. I think a church or a religion that can't do that is not a serious religion. So if we're all just in our independent cells or in our independent 44,000 people churches, 300 person people churches, and we don't really ever gather on the world stage in any way, I think that it's not a serious movement. What was a big deal for me is it really looked like a big unification moment beyond the divisiveness of the church's politics. So,
That
our
was
multiple
awesome.
denominations.
Yeah, because you actually had all these denominations joining hands as brothers and sisters in ways that we haven't in the past years.
When I was there were like a couple of ladies, and they just got together, and they had no idea who each other were, but they were hugging not just hugging each other, but like, linked arm in arms like this, and swaying back and forth, worshiping, and dancing, and dances that looked nearly coordinated, but these women did not know each other, so it was really
funny.
I mean, like, almost like Irish dancing or something. Like,
Really?
It was interesting, to say the least. We can talk about that event maybe some other time in more detail, but that was a big event. That could have been one of these significant markers. I have a different theory about what it was, though. About what that moment was. Obviously, the reason we're talking about our theories about it is because, obviously, September happens after June. So he didn't have any interpretation of what September was going to be. So he had no idea. Obviously, what happens in November, he has no idea. Cuties.
Yeah, I think for society at large, it was probably cuties. Probably for the Christian world, it was the big meeting in D.C., but for everybody else, cuties was a huge unification movement, because it actually woke everybody up to what our society was actually becoming.
Yeah, and you saw people across all kinds of realms of ideology coming together on this particular issue, with the exception of some people on the more progressive left.
But there weren't even that many exceptions there.
Yeah, that was mostly like a media-driven thing. I don't think it was like... I think you could honestly have linked hands with a Marxist at that time in agreement because of how appalled just about everybody was about it. And here's the thing, people knew about cuties ahead of time. They knew about it before September, but that moment of unification that we saw really came in September, and the massive cancellation of Netflix subscriptions, the utter trashing of this movie, basically into almost memes, like anti-meme status. Basically a real thing. So that's a sign. So, we could point to these things as being indicators of those three things, three taps. Maybe there's some interesting, because he really did focus in on the number 3 here. So there may be some symbolism to that. There are 3 months where we have the underline and tapping, particularly because we're going to talk about November now. Back to the prophecy. After the tapping, on September, it flips 3 more pages, it flips October to November. And on November, underline, and then the Holy Spirit hand balls its fist and just punches the calendar, and it explodes into disembodied letters that are just flying and falling all over the place. And that is a huge sign. Okay, that just comes across as...
Question, is this when he heard brace yourself?
No, he hadn't heard brace yourself at this point. Not in this particular prophecy. So, again, this is something he felt on June 22nd. So we're about to go into the details of what happens after the vision, because like the other one, had the calendar scene, and then it goes over to visions of what the world's going to be like. And this is interesting to say the least. So take these for what you will, but I think we can see some parallels today now that it is early November, and these could go through November, so we're looking at, again, a lot of litigation in the election, but let's talk about those specifics. Here's what he's got. Armed protests with fighting in the street. Now, we've seen armed protests already. We've seen a man shot and killed in these leftist guys who were chasing down Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha. They get shot and killed. That was more self-defense. Armed protests more or less being people who are protesting. They're the active protesters, and they're armed. I don't know how much of that we've seen to this point, but there has been some, okay? Mm-hmm. Businesses completely shut up, okay.
I mean, we've definitely seen that already.
This is, I mean, shut up to the point of DC was covered in wood panelings and wood fences, just covering up all the businesses to prevent people from going crazy. So businesses completely shut up. I think that's solid. I think that's a solid prediction. Emptied schools that look like they were in ruin. So he describes them as like being cobweb-like. There are clearly schools that have not reopened in parts of the country.
But to me, this is what he's getting at, is that this will become more of a wide phenomenon where people are not in school.
Yeah, and those of you who have kids, feel free to share kind of like your experiences with this stuff right now, because it'll help kind of with the interpretation of what this stuff means. But let's go to the next one. Banks with roofs torn off with money flying out of the roofs. Flying out. And he describes this as wealth being taken. Mm-hmm. Wealth being taken. So kind of a symbolism there. It could be symbolism, so we're starting to get some mixed territories, because unlike the part 1 prophecy, everything there was basically literal. I can't remember any part of that prophecy where there wasn't anything specific. Mm-hmm. I think everything was pretty specific in that one. So, and keep that in mind, because we're going to see this takes a turn for the weirder, for sure. Mm-hmm. Let's say wealth being taken out. We could consider that as a Marxist takeover or a socialist takeover, where people, we could see it as.
Could that even just be a major economic depression?
It could be a major economic depression. It could be you're seeing price of everything go up.
Oh yeah, he did say hyperinflation, didn't he?
We'll talk about that in a little bit, but because that's part of another. He has 3 dreams total that he talks about in this video, and then there's one more, but these are the 2 major ones we're talking about, the part 1, part 2 prophecy. Mm-hmm. Washington, D.C. burning. As far as I know today, that hasn't happened too much in Washington, D.C.
Not like Minneapolis.
We are not through the election. Okay, but when we talk about Washington, D.C., he means massive fire spread. So we're talking about Hunchback of Notre Dame, hellfire. It looks rough, and I don't think we're seeing that right now. We had the National Guard deployed in D.C. and in, I think, 15 other states, their National Guards were deployed. I believe in Wyoming, if I recall, there was one National Guard guy deployed through the entire state, so there's that. You do it, man. You do it.
He is the one.
You're the guy. He's going to be our, what is it called? Our John Wick or whatever. He just, okay, you guys. Anyway, enough joking around. I don't think we're seeing a whole lot of DC burning right now.
No,
But,
I wouldn't say so.
but, does that feel likely, guys? Well, let's see what happens when we compare it to what we're looking at here. Okay, this is an This is the one that made me perk. Okay, it is people being rounded up by Chinese and Russian soldiers who were cooperating together and rounding people up. Foot on the ground soldiers in the United States of foreign militaries and blue helmets, quote unquote, at the UN that were described as a military thing taking place. Mm-hmm. To me, there was another prophecy that I listened to before I listened to this one, back when this one originally came out. I think we listened to it like in early July.
Yeah.
And we kind of been paying attention to these things going on as they were happening. And this one stuck out to me because the other prophecy had talked about Chinese and Russian dogs being held back by somebody holding them on a leash, and they were rabid, they were infuriated, and they were aimed at the United States. And the United States was open, and they were being held on by a very thin thread. So when I heard that, it made my ears perk up back in July, and I said, we need to really be paying attention. So at that point, I was like, pull all the troops out. All the troops to the U.S. right now. But the big emphasis of the first of the prophecy that we're not talking about today in great detail was that the church was supposed to be the one standing in the gap. Mm-hmm. And if they did, those dogs wouldn't be released on the United States. But if we didn't do our job in that case, this is something we'll be seeing. So, are we going to be seeing this kind of thing? Alright, so let me talk just a little bit about Civil War, because it is all the buzz these days. And when I'm thinking about Civil War in America, I know a lot of people are thinking like the Bill Maher idiotic take of, oh, we don't have a Mason-Dixon line or whatever. That's not how Civil Wars look like in the modern world. They don't look like a country that is divided into perfect squares and they're fighting across the battlegrounds. That's just not what they look like. It looks like, small pockets of insurrection. All you really need is somebody to overtake the White House in Civil War these days.
So you're looking more like a guerrilla warfare that comes up suddenly and then dissipates suddenly.
Yeah, we're not having muskets and cannons. We're not just figuring out how to hide in bushes to kill people. So forget those takes. They're dumb. What I think is really important to pay attention to, and especially how it relates to the Russian and Chinese soldiers, is if you guys have ever seen this anime called Mob Psycho, it's one of my favorites. Me and Hannah have watched it, I think, a couple of times now. And in this one, Mob, who's the main character, is a psychic kid. He's very powerful. He's had psychic powers for a long time, and his little brother just learned his psychic powers, and his little brother's been jealous a long time. And a one-sided conflict ensues where the brother wants to start a conflict with his older brother, Mob. And Mob doesn't really care. He actually is kind of excited for his brother that he got his psychic powers, but he's really cocky and he's turned the knife on him. And what you see happen, and what I think is very powerful, and I think this is what a civil war would genuinely look like in our country, at least this is what I think, that an anonymous villain comes out of nowhere and just tackles the older brother Mob, and he's a psychic too, and he's just dominating, and his plan is to kidnap, and the younger brother is in like, oh my gosh, that's my brother, what are you doing? You can't attack my brother, you can't do this. So immediately, this little one-sided conflict is shattered, and the hope is to protect the family. I want to believe that America is like that. I want to believe that if civil war happens, it ends instantly because we see something like Chinese and Russian soldiers invading because the opportunity has come. America's at war with itself. Time to overtake it. But will it? Will it be something like that? It's hard to say. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. There's so many variables there. I would hope that we would come together.
Yeah, because, you know, where we're talking about your brothers and sisters in America dying at the expense of some literal communist country takeover. Do you guys really want to see that kind of thing in our lifetime? I sure as heck don't, and I don't want my kids to go through it, so our kids. The next one. No sign of President Trump and leadership in D.C. So there's no leadership in D.C., no sign of President Trump in these moments. Yeah, I think you could broadly just consider this like, you know, maybe we don't even have a president.
Or maybe the president
There's uncertainty.
In hiding, or he's in a different location. I mean, it's open for interpretation there.
Yeah, there's a lot of interpretation, but guys, we're talking about litigations on who the next president's going to be because of how close this race was. We're not talking about a Biden landslide where it's easy for Trump to just quit up. We're talking about some dirty games that look like are afoot. And we're talking about definite litigations, I think. I think we're definitely looking at litigations, especially if it comes down to Pennsylvania. If it comes down to Pennsylvania, we are looking at litigations, maybe even for a long time. And how will you have a president if you don't know who it is? I think there's something to that one. The next one, this is where I think where it gets very weird, because now we're definitely moving into the metaphorical sense, I believe. But, I mean, who knows? We Christians believe in an omnipotent God, so omnipotent reality is possible, I suppose. And this one is gargoyles attacking people from 10 feet off the ground mercilessly.
So again, this is a dream that he's having, and I think there's a lot of metaphorical things going on.
Yep.
So to me,
Yes.
I would think as a Christian that would be spiritual warfare. I would think that would be, because he talks about how the gargoyles had grown, how there were like small gargoyles when the riots first started, and now they're bigger. So to me, that's more angst, more violence.
Are you seeing that? Is that something I missed between the part 1 prophecy and the part 2 prophecy?
Yes, that is
changes a lot.
actually.
Because I was going to say that, you know, in the part 1 prophecy, we don't really see anything that metaphorical.
No,
but
there is.
If we do see that, then, so, those of you who, or we don't have the video in front of us to double check, so those of you who are interested, go to the video and maybe check it out, but,
Yeah.
So yeah, there could be some metaphorical tendency there, we'll see. And this one is the last one, and this is why I think you guys need to really pay attention to the meanings here, and that this is not something that is just happening apart. He says he sees churches and homes being burnt. Now, for those of you who know of the authoritative structure that God has allowed in our world to be run by humans, we have basically 3 pinnacles of authority structure. Government, the church, the home. And at this point, the government is burning in America. The churches are burning in America. And the homes are burning in America. Now, obviously, those two are going to be a lot more close to you, hopefully, than the government. But your church is being burned, your home's being burned. We're talking about it getting personal, and I think this is indicating, in terms of these riots, are going to spark in a big way. It moving to the residential areas, for sure. We're talking maybe even to the suburbs. So, you know, if you think you're safe, time to start preparing. And like I said at the beginning, he marks this as a warning for rural America, but also America at large. So,
Which implies it's going to move out of the cities.
Yeah, it's going to move out of the cities. So even, and if you're going to have a guerrilla war, are you going to be able to just do it in the cities? I don't know. I don't think so. You're going to have to get to those cities, aren't you? And what are you going to have to cross through to get to those cities if you don't have airplanes? Rural America. Have you guys ever heard of the 4th Amendment of the United States, by the way? Where soldiers cannot force you to take up shelter in your homes.
Like they did in the Revolutionary War with the British.
It's kind of one of these
came into our
amendments
homes.
that we think is out of date and all. Like, why the heck would we even need this? If it's a civil war, guys, you're going to need it. We're talking about potentially even ground war against Russians and Chinese if this prophecy is true. This could... Consider that right. Know that you have it. It's your Fourth Amendment right, okay? That you are not forcibly compelled to take up soldiers into your home, okay? So make sure to keep that in mind if things do take a turn for the worse. Prophecy ends, like the last one, with the words repeated, brace yourselves, brace yourselves, brace yourselves. So we're going to go, he has an analysis of his own preparation, obviously, because at this point he has not seen anything happen. But before we do that, let's talk about his third dream really quick. Mm-hmm. And what he said this on his preface on the day, so he had this literally the night before he started recording the video. And he had a dream about going to a bank, and he was unable to get coin-based currency. So he asked for, like, I don't know, can I get a roll of quarters? And she says, actually, you can't because we don't actually have that low of a currency printed.
I think we should make a note here. This was before the national coin shortage.
Yeah, so there was a national coin shortage that was really brief, I think. Is it currently? Like, what is the story with this national coin shortage?
I mean, when I go to Food Line, there's still a shortage.
So, that's a thing, guys. And I don't know how close this is related to November also, so... this one isn't as clear cut in terms of like its descriptors, but he's talking to the manager who is unable to provide him the change, and she says to him that we're looking at hyperinflation. First goes the small change, then the dollar, and even the $5 bill. So guys, if we're looking at that, let him tell you here what precautions you need to take regarding this part 2 dream as well as this one. First, if you have not been buying up gold and silver, you haven't been buying up these hard metals that have basically a very static exchange rate across the world, you should have been doing this a long time ago, honestly. So it's really hard to encourage people to do it now, especially since these prices have gone up since economic uncertainty, and now that we're in the throes of the election and it's uncertainty, yeah, it's going to be tough buying gold and silver right now. So, but if you can get it, my God, help yourself pick some up. Because if what we're looking at is true, it's going to get worse. Next, we need to start gathering and stockpiling. Think like Joseph's preparation in Egypt, where he is encouraging us to stock up for 9 years of famine. So, is it 9 years of famine? 7 years?
I think it's 7 years.
Okay. So 7 typically is like a divine number
completion.
So it's interesting. So, could it be 7 months of election? Because by then it'll be complete, right? At least we hope. 7 days. I don't know. Next. And this one is less of a preparation idea because I think those are the most preparation ideas. But let's talk about this point. It is people's faith is going to be damaged by this, and I think as a result we're going to be seeing a lot of the chaff in the Christian movement be blown away as a result. But a lot of people, it's going to be really easy to lose faith in these times, because if your faith is built on prosperity, you are going to lose your faith. It's just going to happen. But if your faith is built on the solid rock of the knowledge of Jesus Christ and of the knowledge of God the Father for who He is and what He has done for you in your life personally, you might be able to see a purification of the church in these times. But we're going to have a serious religious falling out in the United States as a result, because we don't have a lot of community based on it. So, before we end the video, let's just go over a couple of key questions real quick. Where me and Hannah are just going to kind of react to these questions, so they're kind of predicted FAQ questions. So, question number 1. this one's to you, Hannah. What does this mean for the church?
So I think the big deal is that the church needs to be ready spiritually, emotionally, to support each other in their faith, because we have to be encouraging each other during these times. And I think that's going to be one of the main ways that we get through. Yeah. And we also need to be there for each other physically in ways we're not used to if things go really, really south. So early church, if someone's in need in your church, you go out and you help them. Someone needs food, you give them food. Yeah. We're not used to actually having to do that because we live in such a prosperous nation, and we've never had to
especially
do things
one
like
that is very focused on the individual as well. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, though.
And also, we need to be amping up spiritually and not allowing ourselves to degrade. And when things happen that seem in line with judgment on our nation, I think we need to understand there is a bigger picture going on, and there is still a God in heaven who's in control and who cares about us and who cares about our lives.
Yeah. I think you're basically right there. I think it's really easy to just try to write answering this question off as, well, it's going to fall apart, and so what you need to do is, if you're not right with God, you need to get right with God. We're not talking you're not going to be able to stand alone through this. I don't think we're going to be able to stand alone in our isolated little 300 church pods, our little 44,000 mega church pods that are really just a bunch of small groups that are coming together underneath one pastorate. We're talking about, we need to have strong community. Families, guys. Emphasis on your families too. Whatever differences you can solve between your families, whatever you got going on, whether you got people in your family who are Christians who are voting for Democrats, or you got aggressive conservatives who are attacking you based off of your desire to not go with everything that they say. Try to resolve those things, because if you're going to stand in the gap for your own family, you need to be able to look beyond our political atmosphere, our political realms, and being willing to extend a hand. You're not going to change anybody's mind by bitching at them, okay? You're only going to be able to win people back over to living for Christ by being an example yourself, and by that, extending the hand of mercy to them. And you're probably going to have to do that. And if you're one of these people who has been prepping, and you are in a position where the Lord has given you the opportunity to have some foresight on all this stuff, and you have been prepping, you have all kinds of food, you're ready for the famine to come. What happened in the Joseph story? The family that hated him comes to him, okay? And they beg him for food, and he eventually wins them over.
And he helps them.
Yeah,
that's the key point.
Helps them. Extends the hand of mercy. You don't have to threaten to kill the youngest among you. Okay, you don't need to do that part. Just extend that hand of mercy, and extend it to your friends too. For your friends out there who will take part in it. Because hey, listen, the opportunity's coming. Maybe we can all save each other. Yeah, that'd be cool. Jesus helping us. How should you prepare? Question number 2. I think if we're going to prepare, and we already said it, is there...
Stock your pantry, have a way to defend yourself is something he actually underlines.
Yeah, have something to defend yourself. Yeah, for sure. Second Amendment rights, you have it, use it. You have your Fourth Amendment rights, you have your Second Amendment rights. You have your First Amendment rights. Use them wisely. Use all those rights wisely, okay? They're called rights for a reason. They're not called do's and don'ts. They're called rights. So you have the option, so consider it very carefully how you're going to use it. As a side note to that, I'm one of those people who said stop protesting. I'm one of those people, the second George Floyd died, I heard that protests were going to start. And before they actually started, I had said they should not be out there protesting. I get it.
That.
You have your First Amendment rights. They're your rights, yes, but should you use them? I don't think you should be censored for anything that you do. I really don't. I really think that whatever you want to do with your First Amendment rights, it should be legal for you to do it. You should have some damn wisdom about what you're going to use your First Amendment rights for, your Second Amendment rights for, your Fourth Amendment rights for. Really use them with wisdom. These rights aren't for a drove of mobs, okay? They are for thinking people who have individual interest. So prepare yourself by becoming wiser, okay? Prepare yourself by listening to people who are going to tell you how to behave properly. I would say if we go on to talk about other things related to this, keep watching us. I think we're pretty smart, you know. So give us some credit if you can. What has become true about November? I think a lot of the things we've already discussed it. We already discussed what's true in this video, so just, you know, rewind to those areas where we're talking about the specifics and watch them. Are we near the end times? Hannah?
So that is such a hard question to answer because honestly, during World War II, especially under Hitler, there were tons and tons of people who thought that moment was the end times. And there were even like signs like flocks of birds, enormous flocks going in opposite directions of what they should be. And people were thinking, well, you know, this looks like the Antichrist. I think this is the end. So it's hard to say, you know, this is the end. But I do think things are tilting in that direction.
If you guys get on Facebook or any other social media today, you probably are seeing people you know saying things or saying this dead meme, what chapter of Revelation are we on today? You know, it's like, is the world ending? I think, nah. I think we got a lot to do here. I really do. I just think that I have kids. My kids have thriving personalities. I can see their individual strengths coming out of them. I think God gave them those strengths for a purpose, and I don't think He's going to take them away into the end times before they have the opportunity to use them. Mm-hmm. I think maybe, though, we have to deal with the cognitive dissonance that, you know, maybe God can prep you for those sorts of things, but maybe they're here. Maybe so. We don't know, and we're not supposed to. So, just consider that whining about the end times or, you know, consulting your horoscopes until the fat lady sings. We have the opportunity to win people for Christ, guys. So don't give up just because it looks like it's coming to an end. That's how you lose Pennsylvania if you're Donald Trump, guys, is by you people giving up. That's why you're supposed to vote, by the way, in districts you think you're going to lose. Because, one, you can shift the angle at how the country's going to view that area if it gets a bigger vote, even if they do lose. They're like, whoa, there's something happening there. You know, we can see the movements. Be part of, if you want to be noticed, you got to go. You got to go and be part of that thing. And two, obviously, you know, you never know. You could take it if enough of you come up. And you know, obviously, if you're that person who says that, how many more of you are there out there? And what could you have been? Something to think about. All right, hot take. Here we go. Do you think the full prophecy that we've gone through here, the November calendar prophecy, is true? Think it's real? Think it's true?
I think it's more likely to be true. Because we've seen a lot of those things actually happen already. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, when I was listening to it, I felt like it was inspired. What it was saying.
You hear that? When I first listened to it, it perked my interest. And as I've been following it throughout the past months, I've seen a lot of the things here, at least in some measurable way, come to fruition. There are a lot of things that we're not seeing, maybe because it's still too early. But here's my take here. If it's not true, and you do all the preparation you need to, then the worst case scenario is that you're going to have a lot of rice and beans to eat. And you're going to finally have that gold and silver stockpile that you really should have gotten a long time ago. But if it is true, and you don't prepare, you're going to wish you did. I think I'm going to leave the final words of this episode to David Coverston himself. But before we let him end us out, I'd like to thank everybody for paying attention. And if you like this video and you like the rest of the commenting that we do, obviously, I know I talked a lot more than Hannah in this one because, you know, I'm a straight white male and I have my privilege.
It's okay, I talked a lot more in the last one.
But, you know, it was just a lot easier to have one person reading the summary. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and subscribe, and we will see you in the next video.
So, heed my words, folks. Believers, stop messing around if you're not living for the Lord like you need to. Because the press, there's an olive press moment coming for the church in this country. An olive press moment. And we're going to get crushed and squeezed and pushed down. That's why I believe God keeps saying, brace yourself. He's saying this to me so I can say it to you. Brace yourself for the things that are coming. Endure till the end, no matter how hard it gets. I'm not giving up the faith that I have in Christ. I've come too far in this walk and too far in my life to do that. But I want to make sure that others don't make that mistake and don't just walk away from it. Take up the cross, deny yourself, and follow Him.